Where do you think the air pollution is the worst, Mayu?
No, I guess it's China is the worst. Look at this area.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to Live Travel Asia, where we also discuss what it's like living and traveling in Asia. So, I'm gonna do another discussion video. This one is about a hugely asked issue. It is about the air quality here in Bangkok. This is a comment that I've gotten the most in my comment section, that it's not worth living out here because the air quality is just like the worst in the world, and you're gonna get lung cancer and die. What's the point of living out here? I mean, it gets quite extreme. So, yeah, I mean, let me just first start out by saying, again, this is just my opinion, and air quality, more than maybe anything else that I've discussed, is going to vary. Like, your opinion on it is going to vary most relatively depending on where you've lived, what kind of air you're used to. I mean, this is such a non-objective matter. You can't really just say air quality is, you know, bad because maybe you've lived in an area where the air quality is even worse, like me, or you are just living in Alaska where it's like pristine and the air is perfect, and yeah, relative to that, air quality in Bangkok is bad. But one of the biggest misconceptions I think that people have is that air quality in Bangkok is one of the worst in the world. And to that statement, I wouldn't really agree with that. And that's just my opinion. But let me go ahead and first talk about it using probably the most factual way I can, which is using air quality index, and then I will you know, move on to a different location and talk about it in a more subjective matter, just based on my experiences as well. So I'll go ahead and first talk about air quality in the most objective way I can, which is by using air quality index. Now, like, one of the things that I really highly encourage you to do, like anything I say on this channel, is to just find out for yourself. Don't listen to what anybody else says, because one of the things I've realized while traveling out here is that most of everything you hear back home, particularly in America, where we're just so isolated from the rest of the world, just geographically, ideologically, that most of the things that you hear may not be true, or it's extremely exaggerated. So first of all, I highly recommend that you find out for yourself what is right and wrong, and what is true to you relative to your situation. That's my advice to you. And it doesn't really take much effort. Just search, you know, air pollution, air quality in Google, and this is what you get. You get a air quality index. You know, people monitor air quality. This is a big thing because it may not be where you're from, but in certain areas where the air could get really bad and hazardous, people want to know when they need to, like, put on a mask or stay inside. So there's actually a map for that. Now, how you read this map is the best air quality is generally in green, and it's a lower number, so like, this is not a bad number. And then it starts getting worse, then it'll get into yellow, and then it'll just keep getting more red and red and red until it's just completely red, and that's really bad. And then when it gets into, like, toxic levels, it turns into really weird colors like purple. But I've zoomed in to Bangkok, and I want to first show you guys what the current air quality is in Bangkok. You see that, you know, depending on where you are, it varies. And this is something I'll talk about more in my little subjective opinion part later on. But first of all, I want you to realize that even within Bangkok, there is a huge variance in air quality. So please be aware of that. If somebody is talking about air quality, be mindful of where in Bangkok they're talking about, because depending on the location you live in Bangkok, the air quality varies greatly, and I'll go ahead and discuss that later. But before I do, let me just go ahead and just show you the rest of this so you can sort of have an idea of where I'm coming from when I say I really think the fears about air quality in Bangkok, it's overblown. And it's because, you know, be aware, the main places that I've lived in throughout my life is Korea, Kenya, and California, mainly SoCal. I lived a year in Connecticut, but yeah, you know, I can't really remember much from there, or even when I was too young in Kenya. Other than that, yeah, Kenya, like where I lived, like out in the mountains, it was, the air quality was really great. But let's just zoom into California, for example, right here. You know, supposedly the green state. A lot of Americans hate Californians because they think we're like tree huggers and we're trying to get like electric vehicles and stuff. There's a reason for that, and it's because air quality in SoCal particularly is not good, and I can tell you that for a fact, having lived there. I mean, relative to Bangkok, check it out. It's pretty much about the same. Like, if it's good, it's around 40, and then if it gets actually like to 69, 57, some areas are even 78, which is actually worse than what it is in Bangkok. Yeah, I know you guys are gonna also, like, somebody's already thinking, well, I'm showing you air quality in Bangkok when air quality is good. Yeah, relatively right now, the air quality isn't that bad. And that's something that you have to be mindful of. Air quality changes also very drastically depending on the seasons. And something that a lot of people have, the reason why a lot of people have a bias against air quality in Bangkok possibly is high season, when tourists tend to come to Bangkok to visit, are generally dry seasons, seasons that it doesn't rain. And dry seasons are generally when the air quality is the worst, because you don't have like wind blowing through and rain coming down to clear out the smog. And I know particularly in Bangkok, like 3-4 months ago, it was really, really bad, and that's why I decided to get like an air filter for my condo, to just have good, clean air inside my condo. But you know, like, so be aware of that, but I don't think I'm portraying, like, my experience of air quality that I'm talking about as far as comparing to California. It's not much different, because same as Bangkok, in California during dry seasons, it's forest fire season. And I could tell you, when there's forest fires, I literally have ashes land on my car. I think people who live in California can vouch for this. Air quality in California isn't all that great. You actually have literally black ashes flying around in the air, even if there's, like, down here by, you know, Orange County where I actually lived, even when there's forest fires up here. So, like, I think the fears about air quality are overblown. And now, maybe I'm picking on California a little bit, so just look at any other area, like, that has, like, a big city near it. It's not all that great, honestly. Like, let's go to good old Texas, you know, the polar opposite of possibly California. I mean, it's not that much better, you know? Let's go to, like, well, I don't know where these areas are. I don't really know too many cities around here, but you see? It's not that much better. Yes, out in the middle of the mountains where nobody's really living, air quality is good. That's what you should expect. But, I mean, when you're comparing air quality in Bangkok, you should compare it to other cities. I mean, I don't think it's a fair portrayal for someone who is only living out, like, in the woods, or only likes the nature, to bash on air quality in Bangkok, because it's common sense that air quality in cities are bad, you know? But air quality in Bangkok, in my opinion, hasn't been particularly that much worse than any other city that I've been in. Now, one of the reasons I actually particularly live in Bangkok is because I think the air quality is good, relatively. And this is coming from me because I was living in California, and then the next place I considered living was Korea. And I don't know why, but I thought air quality in Korea wouldn't be that bad. But Seoul has one of the worst air qualities. I'll go ahead and touch up on why I think that, like in my little subjective part later. But let me just go ahead and show you like a brief map of air quality around there. I think we are all, first of all, aware that China has bad air quality, and you could clearly see that. You know, it's so bad that you'll see on the news that they'll actually literally turn off the monitoring sometimes, not to like scare people. So I mean, when it gets bad, it gets into like 162, 112, like pretty much across a whole region. And if you see, actually Korea is really close to China, and particularly in the spring months, I refuse to go there. I mean, right now I'm shooting in June, so it's not gonna be the best air quality in Korea, but it's gonna soon start being like rainy season. So when it rains, it should clear out the air. But like around April, I literally cannot stay in Seoul for more than a week without my nose literally starting to bleed. That's when I know it's bad. When I blow my nose, there's black stuff coming out. And I think, you know, I know there's gonna be some people who are gonna say, you know, these air quality things could be rigged. Yeah, it's not 100% true. But honestly, in my experience, looking at this air quality map, my personal experience, having traveled to all these different locations, I could tell you that relative to what they say on here, it's relatively correct. Because, yeah, just Korea is not that great. Look, it's like 124, 149, 82 when it's better. And that seems like a complete outlier. Somehow it's like 22 there. But you could generally see that air quality in Seoul is not that great. I mean, that's when I think it's really bad. And I've actually avoided going to China for some time because I've just heard from other people that it gets really ridiculous there. And trust me, I care about air quality. It's not that I live in Bangkok because I don't care about air quality and I want to just die of lung cancer. I mean, ultimately, it's just a balance. I choose to accept not the best air quality because I like the convenience and the luxury and the culture of living in a city. That's just something that I choose to accept. But air quality, when it gets very bad, when my nose literally starts bleeding, that's when I try to avoid it. And I know that Korea is bad, but when your Korean aunt travels to Beijing and tells you that you should not go there just solely on the fact that the air quality is bad, that's when I sort of get scared. So I've been putting it off, although I will eventually go to Beijing because, you know, like I said in the beginning, I want to find out for myself. You know, visiting Beijing for a couple days isn't going to kill me, and overall, in the bigger scope of things, I think I do want the experience of visiting a place, no matter how, like, you know, toxic you think the air quality may be, because honestly, Beijing is home to one of the largest population in the world. People are living there, okay? So it's not like people are dying. You could survive, and there's ways you can get by with bad air quality, such as staying indoors where things are filtered, or just wearing a mask, you know? But, yeah, I'm just trying to say that main point is just find out for yourself. If you want an objective opinion, this is probably as objective as you can get, checking some kind of a monitor. Honestly, if you're gonna comment and say this is not accurate, please comment where I can get a more accurate reading of air quality, because I myself would personally like to know for my own reasons. But you know, air quality index is like the only way I know that I can objectively rate air around the world and cross-reference it to my experience and either agree or disagree to, you know, my experience with air quality. So, yeah, I mean, I understand if you're like from Australia. Oh my gosh, look, that's really nice. It's 3 in Adelaide and 5. You're obviously gonna think Bangkok has bad air quality, but I just don't want people misleading other people to say that it is the worst in the world when it's nowhere near the worst in the world. And okay, let me go ahead and do this, because you're gonna say I'm just comparing it to China where it's the only worst area. But a lot of other people are aware that India has one of the worst air qualities in the world, right? And it's pretty true right there. And, you know, if you look through this, you'll find like areas that you're like, oh my gosh, I never even knew that had bad air quality. But what is this area? Is that like Qatar or Saudi Arabia? It doesn't seem that great, you know? And I'm going to talk about this in a more subjective matter, but one thing that I am aware, because when I was in Korea, this whole like air quality is such a big issue there. Like, cosmetics are being created to deal with all the micro dust that's flying in the air that gets in between your pores and creates wrinkles, etc. Koreans are huge on air quality, right? It's like almost like an election thing, like Donald Trump promising to build a wall. Like in Korea, like you have candidates literally promising to clear up air quality, but it's something that they know is somewhat out of their control. And it's not just, you know, people assume it's because China is polluting and then it's going to Korea. But what I was told is that it's not even China necessarily polluting with their own factories, which I'm sure is an issue, but there's like a huge desert here. And apparently the dust from the desert, it literally flies across. And that has a huge factor of why air quality in China is not good. And same as Korea. So, yeah, a lot of it doesn't even have to do with cities and cars. There's just so much misinformation about air quality. I really encourage you guys to do your own research. I mean, the other day I remember talking to some scientist, and he says, you know, it's not even man-made factories and things like that, industrial things that are creating the most issue to our ozone layer. It's actually cows, because cows like fart and create methane or whatever, and it creates a hole in that has a bigger like factor to it, like the, you know, global warming. I mean, guys, there's just so much like information out there. There's so much that it almost becomes misinformation because there's so much noise. Ultimately, just come out and experience for yourself. And okay, what time is it, Mayu?
40.
Okay, okay, we gotta go somewhere because I have to do a live stream for my Patreons. But I'll go ahead and discuss more about my like subjective experiences about air quality. Oh, one other thing I also wanted to really catch up on is, people always like say you should go to Chiang Mai because the air quality there is better. That is possibly one of the bigger like misinformation that you'll hear out there as well. Air quality in Chiang Mai isn't necessarily better for many reasons. I've personally been there. I didn't think the air quality was that great. I think it's like in people's heads. But if you want to talk about facts, this is what I've heard. Chiang Mai is literally a valley. The air stays pretty stagnant in that valley, and that attributes to bad air quality, even though maybe it's not as industrial as Bangkok. I know that the time that it's the worst, from what I hear, is when they're doing the burnings, particularly like for agricultural reasons. They'll burn like a bunch of trees and stuff, and apparently a lot of that happens like in Myanmar. And actually a lot of that also happens in Cambodia from what I hear. So Thailand also has almost no control over that kind of stuff. And all that smoke and the burning like blows into here, and apparently that creates a lot of issues. When you do go to those areas during the dry seasons, you'll literally feel it. And that's why, you know, we decided to go to Phuket in rainy season. It's one of the reasons we like it. The air is probably the freshest. Another reason is there's not many tourists. It just feels more natural. So I hope this sort of helps. I just highly recommend that you check it out for yourself. Don't just take my word for it or somebody else's word for it. Check it out for yourself. You can clearly see that there are many differing opinions out there in the world, and this is just one using AQI index. But anyways, yeah, we have to go. I have to go to a dog cafe. I'll go ahead and continue talking about this a little bit more in depth. Oh, he doesn't want to take photos with you. Oh my god. Alright, what is up, guys? I originally planned to do the last part of my discussion at the dog cafe, but I was just doing my live stream and it just got carried away. We're discussing something completely different, and it ended up being like a 90+ minute live stream. And then when we checked the time, it was already 20 minutes till 5, which is when I agreed to meet one of my subscribers out here on Soy 13 to have some Korean food. Now it's 11 p.m. and we're parting our ways. Mayu has met her other Japanese friend, and I'm heading back home. But, you know, I did say that I was gonna talk more in depth about the subjective part of air quality as I know it, meaning the part that I think you can't really quantify, but this is basically all just my experience. So if you're like a factual guy, I mean, take this as a grain of salt. And like I said from the beginning, the only way you're gonna really know is you're gonna have to research your scientific facts around air quality. I would really love to hear scientific facts around it myself. I'm not a scientist. I really don't even know where to start to get a truly scientific answer on the air quality in Bangkok. I would like to know though, if someone does a research on it, and all I can do is just now share my experiences and my opinion. You know, originally I planned to do it at the dog cafe, but this might be the best place to do it because this is one of the areas that, well, first of all, I'm in Sukhumvit, and this is an area where most people are when they're traveling out here. It's a main road. This is where the BTS line runs, and most people's perceptions of Bangkok are gonna be based around Sukhumvit. So be aware that I'm aware of that, and also be aware of my bias because I don't live in Sukhumvit. I've never ever lived in Sukhumvit. Quite frankly, I try to avoid Sukhumvit for many reasons. I am not a soy person. What I mean by soy person is the way that the roads are set up here in Bangkok. You have a main road, and off that main road, you have little alleyways, and they call them soys. And they name them numerically, like soy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's many soy 1s because there are many major roads and there are many alleyways that branch off of it. But to a soy person, when you say soy 5, soy 3, they expect you to assume that you're talking about Sukhumvit soy. That's a big pet peeve of mine. I mean, even locals do that when they say soy, you know, 13 or whatever. You know, you're assuming that it's Sukhumvit. But to me, it's like, no, tell me exactly what soy it is. You know, soy, Sukhumvit soy sipa is not the only Sukhumvit soy sipa. There's many soy sipas, you know? So, like, it's a big pet peeve of mine. I mean, people's lives start and end here in Sukhumvit. I'm not even exaggerating because I do work with some guys who have lived here far longer than I have. Maybe 20, 30 years. Some maybe even going on to their 40s. When was the Vietnam War? I mean, I had a guy who's been out here since the Vietnam War. And he has never once even been to RCA where I live. It's not even that far, right? It's like 15 minutes by motorcycle from where we work. Lived out here since the Vietnam War and never ever been to RCA. And he's like, how is RCA like? Oh, why don't you find out? So people's opinions are relatively biased because of that. And they believe Bangkok is only Sukhumvit. And again, many comments about my other video talking about basically me advising people to buy condos sub 2 million, and people will be saying, where can you buy a condo sub 2 million? And I could tell you many places, but you know, when you discuss things with them a little bit more, to them it's like, what? Who would want to live anywhere other than Sukhumvit? You know? Well, quite frankly, me and many other people. And one of the reasons is the air quality is really bad here in Sukhumvit. If you know, remember seeing when I was walking down that soi, many reasons I don't like Sukhumvit. Not only just the air quality, but the noise. I mean, basically all the dirty crap gets stuck here. And it's because you saw all the major tall buildings are lining each side of the road, and you got the BTS SkyTrain going over you. As you saw, it's basically a roof. So it's a tunnel. And one of the major forms of pollution out here as far as traffic is concerned, because first of all, traffic isn't bad everywhere in Bangkok. Some areas, like near my area, there's not that much traffic, but in Sukhumvit there always is traffic. It's literally at a standstill. And what happens is, not only do you have a ton of traffic, but this is a main bus route. So like the city bus goes there. And anyone who's been out here will tell you that these city buses are super old. There's definitely no smog checking on them, and you can literally see black smoke coming out of them. And when you have hundreds of these buses, along with many other non-smog check cars, driving down here and literally stuck, all that smog just stays in this little tunnel, Sukhumvit tunnel. And the only place it has to escape are the little sois on the side, right? Right now I'm in soi 13, which is Koreatown. And there isn't much other place for it to go. Even if there is a breeze, the buildings are blocking it. The only way it will ever get relatively clean is when it rains like a lot. So you got all this nasty air just staying in here. And that's why I think a lot of people think that Bangkok has some of the worst air quality, because when you walk down Sukhumvit, you can literally smell the exhaust of cars everywhere. And that would lead you to believe that the air quality is bad. But actually, if you see that air quality index, it shows that it's not really that much worse than other areas. But I think the smell itself, the smell of the exhaust and whatnot, it just leads you to believe that it is significantly bad. Almost as bad as maybe anywhere else in the world, like China or India. But India and China are clearly worse. Even Korea is clearly worse. And I can tell you that from my own experience, having traveled there. If I go out for an hour, my nose is literally black. I have to like blow my nose, and I have irritation in my nose after a year, and it starts bleeding. I am not exaggerating. So I have a super sensitive like nasal cavity, so I'm super sensitive to really horrible air. But out here in Sukhumvit, I mean, it's pretty bad, but it's not as bad as what I've experienced in those, like, some of the worst cities in the world, as people would say, when it comes to air quality. Another reason I think people are led to believe the air quality here is worse than it actually is, and this might not be unfactual. I mean, some people can just clearly just talk about air quality index and the particles in the air and how bad it is to your hazard. But air quality sometimes has to do with smells and other issues. And I could tell you that you're gonna encounter a lot of interesting smells out here, because the sewage system is somewhat stagnant when it doesn't rain or anything. You have to wait. Generally, like Asian cities, I've noticed, even in Korea, I think my sister was telling me that, I mean, she did some research into it, but America has some kind of an active sewage system where they actively flush, you know, the sewage system constantly, so it's not staying stagnant. Whereas, you know, a lot of Asian countries, to conserve energy, and it's relatively practical because it rains a lot here, just let it stay stagnant until it rains, and then the rain itself will flush this out into, you know, the river or the sea or wherever. So if there is stagnant sewage, it starts smelling a little bit. So is that necessarily like bad air quality in a sense that it's going to cause lung cancer. I don't know if it is, but actually I've heard the other day on the news that smelling someone's farts a lot, it helps prevent Alzheimer's. So I don't know, maybe it's even good for you to smell some interesting smells here and there. So like these interesting smells with the smell of, you know, all the cars that are driving by because you're by a super major road, that is probably going to make people think that Bangkok air quality is bad, especially when you see all the traffic just staying stagnant there. But, you know, don't listen to that because it's common sense. Not everywhere is gonna be like Sukhumvit. This is the most busiest road here in Bangkok. Even where I live is relatively close to the center, and the traffic is nowhere near as bad, nor do I encounter a lot of funky smells like that that I do like here in Sukhumvit. So I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people who travel to Bangkok go back with the impression that Bangkok has one of the worst air qualities. Not only because are they coming during high season, which is dry season, which tends to be when the air is the worst, but they're generally traveling in Sukhumvit. And even people who live here, who've lived here for years, have never really ventured away from Sukhumvit. And the places that they do venture are generally also other places that have really bad air quality because it's like really traveled areas, like maybe Chinatown or something, where there's a ton of cars and traffic. Yeah, I mean, if you want to compare these areas to other areas in the world, it is possible that the air quality is maybe one of the worst in the world, but I mean, this just boils down to... Oh, wait, hold on one moment while I check if the camera is working. Okay, the camera is working. But basically, this boils down to this. I'm just assuming that these people are aware that they gotta compare apples to apples then, you know? Then compare the busiest road in LA, where there's always traffic, and then say that Bangkok is worse than LA. Because LA, if you're in a major road near the freeway or whatever, you can smell the fumes as well. No matter how many green electric cars they have, tons of trucks and stuff going around that are polluting the place and making the air bad. So these kinds of things are very subjective things. I'm not saying this is a fact. This is just my personal experience as far as having lived out here and rating the air quality. I don't want to say that Bangkok's air quality is purely based on the air quality in Sukhumvit Road, which is like a very, very small area, although I will admit where a huge population of foreigners do live. But you are completely free to live here or not to live here. And me not living in Sukhumvit hasn't created as much of an inconvenience as others might assume. A lot of people come here and think you have to live on Sukhumvit because this is where the BTS is. But there are many, many other metro lines and many other ways you can traverse through the city. And yeah, I don't... That's what it is. And even in Sukhumvit, I can tell you that it's still nowhere near as bad as Korea. And if we're talking about Korea, then I'm pretty sure it's gonna nowhere be near as bad as India or China. So I hope this sort of gives you some food for thought. This is just my subjective opinion. Ultimately, come out here, smell the air for yourself, and if you have any other like factual evidence to add to this, I actually would really appreciate it, other than just my opinions. And the only source I know of anything factual, which is the air quality index. And the last thing I want to close out with, if I did, is not about air quality at all, but something that I think is relatively common sense, which is anywhere you live, there is gonna be a certain amount of risk associated with living in that location. And I will will say that living in Bangkok isn't the best place to live if you're trying to have like a healthy life, as in terms of having good air quality. I don't know, the most organic fruits and vegetables. I mean, whatever it is that you believe that you need to stay healthy. But it definitely comes with other positives. You may not think of this as a positive to your health, but lots of people to socialize with, to have fun with, to blow off your stress with, not to feel lonely or depressed. I mean, isn't the statistic like 50% of, you know, serious conditions, it's related to stress? And yeah, I just don't, I think it's overblown that people try to concentrate on one negative and say that's the reason why I think it is the most unhealthiest place in the world. And I just wanted to dispel that. That's the only thing I want to dispel. I don't want to say the air quality here in Bangkok is good. That's definitely not what I'm saying. Air quality isn't good. As you see, it's like every other city. It's pretty bad. But what I'm saying is, I personally don't think it is any worse than any of the other major cities out there. And if you believe that your life is something that should be full of just fresh air, fresh vegetables, I completely support that. I can completely relate to it. I'm not saying that you're wrong to insist on it. As a matter of fact, I myself, I visited Jeju Island, loved it so much there. Fresh air, great, you know, great vegetables, healthy lifestyle that definitely is in my works. I would really like to live there one day. It's just that right now, for my life, I want to experience as much as I can. And Bangkok offers me that. It gives me the convenience to travel everywhere, make a living. There's teaching jobs here that I can have, etc. So that's what's the healthiest thing for me at this moment. And sometimes, you know, you have to make sacrifices, and that's a sacrifice, unfortunately, that I have to make. Deal with a little bit of bad air quality, which I don't think is the worst thing, especially if you are living in a city. People who generally live in cities, for people who don't live in cities, they might not understand, because generally people who don't live in cities don't have this kind of lifestyle, and you could never imagine not running or hiking every day and stuff like that. But quite frankly, this is let me talk to you about this from a city person's perspective. City people don't really go out and hike and jog around the city and stuff as much as, okay, I'm not all of them, but not everyone's like a New Yorker, you know, running and jogging around Central Park every day. At least me and the people I know that live in cities, we generally stay indoors most of the times. That's why we like the city. We like indoors. So 95% of the time, I'm not even exaggerating, I'm indoors. So the air quality outside has relatively little impact on my decision to live out here, and for consideration of my health. I'm generally inside. I'm at the mall, watching a movie, shopping, eating at the restaurant. Even when I'm exercising, I'm inside a gym. I don't even exercise that much, quite frankly. Only time I'm out is when I'm traversing from one location to another, or if I'm like swimming, right? So that's the only time I'm really outside. I'm not a big person that likes to go to these outdoor go-go bars and stuff and drink beer or whatever. I mean, if you are and you like to have that night market experience, then a larger portion of your time is gonna be outside. But relative to, you know, outdoorsy country people, air is not important to city people, because people generally stay in cities because they don't like to be outdoors. So I hope you can understand that. Maybe that's a different perspective for all those people who are just commenting on the relative negative air quality in a city compared to, you know, maybe Alaska or wherever you're living. That it doesn't really apply to us. Now, if you're a city person and you think, yeah, I lived in Beijing and I've lived in Bangkok, and I can clearly say for these experiences that, you know, Bangkok air quality is just as bad as Beijing, that's actually very insightful. And I would love to hear someone say that in my comment section, because I've never been to Beijing, and I can only assume based on these AQI indexes and what everybody else is saying, other people's experiences, that it's extremely bad there, you know? So, I mean, if somebody told me that, I'd be in Beijing in a heartbeat to try it out myself and figure it out. So, ultimately, that's what I want you to do. Come out here, check the air quality out for yourself, see if it's really bad. And if you are, please don't base air quality just on one road, just because everyone else is saying, you know, this is where you should be. Yeah, this is where you should be if you're traveling, but when you're living here, you're not really here that often. At least for me. I try to avoid this place. I go shopping in Rama 9, which is along the MRT line, and the only time I'm ever here is if I need to go to work, and I'm inside all the time, where there's a huge, you know, very modern mall that filters all my air. Let me just double check if I'm still recording. Okay, 21 minutes now. It's not perfect out here, but if these are risks you're willing to accept, for the other pros that I'll be talking about in my other discussion series, I think it's completely worth at least checking out. I actually had a discussion with another guy who, one of my subscribers, and he believes he's living the healthiest life out here in Bangkok. And he used to be from the Bay Area. And his reasons were he was completely overweight and stressed. And his doctor only gave him 2 years to live out there. And being out here in Bangkok, just the culture and just how accessible like organic vegetables are to him at the market that he lives next to, and just how much less work he has to do to make a living and afford a life out here, allows him to exercise and have a healthier life. So there's many reasons that your health might not be good. I can keep listing all these random like things that could impact your health. There's so many things that can impact your health, so many reasons you can die out there, but ultimately you should consider everything as just opinions and come out here and find out for yourself. I feel like I'm repeating myself now, I'm sorry. So I'm about to wrap up. I'll say one more thing though. One thing that you should be aware of as far as my opinions when I talk about these discussion series is that one thing that I feel about living and life is that due to my own personal experiences living out in the States, living a relatively mechanical, robotic life of the 9 to 5, I myself don't really define life as just surviving and maintaining my vital conditions. Ultimately, I believe life and living is experiencing, having different experiences, doing something. That's life. And when I originally came out here, I was so depressed. I was almost suicidal, you know, in my thought that, what am I doing? Life is not worth living. Everything I believed in isn't necessarily true. It's hard to just get by. Only thing I can do is just hate on other people who are having a good life and be idealistic and talk about how the world could be better. It was just such a depressing life. I wasn't really living, I was just surviving. And when I made the decision to come out here and travel and do what I wanted to do, that was because I was willing to accept a certain level of risk, given that I felt like there's no point living if I'm just gonna be doing some repetitive stuff and tasks over and over again just so I can have material things that didn't really matter or impact me or my happiness in the long run. And I guess I thought if I live out here and have more experiences in 5 years, that might be better than me living 50 years just repeating the same thing. That's not life. That's just, I don't know, maintenance, surviving. And after having lived out here for, 3 years now, and finding out not only were there more experiences for me to have had, but that things aren't as dangerous as all the fearmongers were telling me back then and giving me reasons to not come out here. Although I'm relatively open-minded about most people's opinions, the one thing that really annoys me and I have a biggest pet peeve about would be people who discourage other people from... Thanks again guys for tuning into the discussion this week, and I'm so sorry it cut off abruptly. My battery literally ran out on the camera. That's why it sort of ended there. One point that I wasn't able to mention was, and it's a huge factor for me, in Thailand I can literally go months and months without getting a whiff of secondhand smoke. Thailand is probably the most smoking unfriendly country, which may be a positive or a negative to you, but that's one reason I also think air quality in Bangkok is particularly acceptable to me. Now, I also realized while reviewing this video that I was getting really emo about this, and I particularly don't like that because I want the vibe of my channel to be positive, but these last couple discussion questions were particularly comments that I repeatedly got on my channel, some of which I had to delete just because it got far too negative about why Thailand or living out here is just such a horrible thing and the worst thing you can do in your life. And I really had to respond to those questions, and I couldn't really keep my emotion at bay. For that reason, I will be actually discontinuing these discussion series for a couple weeks and instead do my living in Thailand series by doing our beach series from Phuket, where me and Mayu enjoyed a couple days relaxing and just chilling out. Hope you appreciate that. I will definitely come back with more discussion topics, but I think I pretty much covered all the major negative comments that I keep getting on my channel, and I'll just be tackling some topics that people will ask me here and there and try to help you as much as I can and share my opinions and thoughts with you. Whatever the case, I hope you have an amazing week, and I'll see you next week for more vlogs about living and traveling in Asia. Okay guys, I was doing a relatively good job of checking that my camera was within the time limit, but I completely forgot to monitor the battery level. So, camera died, it cut out on me. I don't even know where it cut out on me. But I know I was just sort of talking about and wrapping up that about my pet peeve. So my pet peeve is it's negative people. I don't want to completely hate on negative people because negative people provide alternate opinions. It's great. I want to see other perspectives. But reason I particularly have a thing against negative people, and this is just purely based on my opinion and my experiences, is, gosh, I also don't like this construction sound. But it's because when I came out here, the only regret that I really had about coming out here was not having come out here sooner. Having listened to all the fear mongers back home that were giving me these reasons not to come out here. And those reasons aren't unjustified. They're usually true. But what it did was it unjustly made me fear traveling and doing what I wanted to do more than it should have. And I've come out here to find out that a lot of those fears aren't justified or it's exaggerated. And I wish I just had the courage to do what I wanted to do sooner. Yeah. And you know, I don't want to completely discourage anyone from saying anything negative, because I believe it's good to have negative feedback as long as it's constructive. So I just want to say that if you are going to say something negative, please just provide an alternate solution or an alternate to people like me that are looking for an answer to live life and experience more of life, but cannot see anything or any other alternatives. My alternative was to come out to Asia. I am humble enough to admit there's other alternatives. I am not speaking some kind of alternate truth. And if you have other alternatives, feel free to share. And at least let us know where you're coming from, what solution you're providing. And please don't just discourage people for the sake of discouraging them, as it just feels like those people are holding everybody else who want to experience more in life back, and having them just as miserable as everybody else, keeping them in a system that enslaves them so they can benefit off of it. That's the only reason I can see people being negative with no alternate solution that's gonna help people like me experience more of life. And no, not everyone is gonna be like me. Maybe experiencing more of life is gonna be different for other people. I can tell you, people who are in Thailand, you know, experiencing more of life is not about, you know, going to jungles, backpacking, doing these wild things, but it'll be more about going to America, you know, having a really cool stable job, buying all these cool things that they never got to have. And I can completely relate to that. But someone like me, who's had the fancy cars, the fancy house, lived in the fancy places, went to the fancy restaurants, you know, had fancy clients and dined with them, and had a company credit card with an expense account, it's different for me. So I just hope you can provide an alternate solution with any negative comment, so we know where you're coming from or what you are proposing, so that we know that if that alternative will be applicable to us, and if your negative is something that we should consider. So I hope I'm making more sense. Yeah, I'm just sorry if I'm hating on negative people. I know I shouldn't. A lot of people tell me I shouldn't apologize and just keep doing what I do. But I have to sympathize with people who are negative, because I myself, I was negative. I was one of those people that was idealistic and tried to justify my lifestyle, and in some ways being on the moral high ground somehow gave me encouragement to move on with my life back in the States, no matter how mundane or boring and lifeless it was. And I feel for people who are negative, because I know there's more to you, you know. Negative people aren't all bad. It's just that's their way of surviving. And you know, ultimately the purpose of my channel is to reach out to people who are like me back in the States, just trying to look for an alternative, who could relate to my situation and maybe my particular situation and my experiences can give them courage to do what they want to do, you know. And I know even negative people, as much as they might hate on my life or what I do or what other people are doing and having fun, deep inside, and they're searching for an answer themselves, you know. And then of course there are the negative people who really have everything figured out and they're being negative because I'm just immature. I'm not really speaking the ultimate truth. And if that's the case, please be negative, correct me, tell me a better alternative to my life, tell me, you know, whatever it is, you know, get a higher degree, get more income, you'll be more happier, I've gone through your situation, or I don't know, whatever experience you may have. There are tons of people that are older and wiser than me. I can only just share my experience, try to help other people in my situation, even if it's not the ultimate knowledge. At least I hope someone can find comfort knowing that there are people out in the world that are insecure and not always positive and like robots. So yeah, I'm just a normal guy. I'm finding relative happiness out here. I'm just trying to put some positivity out there in the world and help people. I don't know why it's so hard doing it, but whatever the case, I hope you found this vlog discussion informative, and I hope to see you guys next week for more discussions about living and traveling in Asia on Wednesday as usual. And this Saturday I'll have a travel vlog as usual as well. So I hope you have a fantastic week wherever you are, whether you're a negative or positive person, and I hope to see you again for more vlogs about living and traveling in Asia.